So it was in 2017. I was sitting on the set of Yellowstone in Darby, Montana. We were filming season 1, and I was with the entire cast. So we're outside looking over Big Sky Country. And I was sitting in my cast chair, and it says Denim Richards on the back of it. And I've never felt better. And I'm taking pictures to social media. And I guess now the cool kids call it aura farming. It means they're just trying to get attention. And I was absolutely doing that. And I looked up and I saw a lot of the other actors like on their phones, and they're impassionately like walking back and forth. And I'm sitting here doing duck licks. And after they get off the phone, they just sit back, and one pulls out a cigarette and lights it and smoke. I say, what are you guys doing? He said, we're working. I'm like, isn't that what we're doing now? He's like, no, Denim, one day this ends. And I was like, what ends? It was like any moment the show could just be canceled. And I was like, a couple years ago, I was actually living in my car. I don't want to hear this eventually ends, right? But what this did is it actually set me on this path of really thinking about what the entertainment industry was. And when I got into it when I was younger, at 5 years old, actually, where teachers came into my classroom and said, hey, he doesn't like to sit still. Maybe he should be on stage. And so they thrust me onto stage, and I have never left. And that was 10 years ago. But what I didn't realize growing up was what I was actually doing. I knew that I was in the creative arts industry, but I didn't understand what industry actually meant. I thought it was a place where you got to just dress up and do make-believe, and you put on weird costumes and wigs and makeup and do all the things. And then as you start to get older, you realize that there is this giant mechanism called industry. And I had no idea what industry even was, because I was so desperate just trying to be an actor. But then as you start to get older and hang around bigger people, better people, or people that are where you want to be, you start to hear about certain things about, hey, let's talk about the future. Let's talk about shareholders. Let's talk about unemployment, employment, KPIs, ROIs. And I'm like, I'm just trying to get an audition, right? But the great thing about this was, after hanging out with a lot of people for a long time and learning, was that on the continent, we are missing some giant opportunities when it comes to the creative economy. And so for me at Opulent Entertainment Group, we coined this term that we're not in the creative industry, that we are actually in the business of entertainment, because it's entertaining sometimes, but a business all the time. And so now I travel all around the world, and I teach and talk to the public and the private sector about how the business of entertainment actually makes money. Because again, a lot of people who have all these master's and doctorate degrees and are very, very intelligent still believe that the entertainment industry is just a bunch of people wearing makeup in costumes and running around. And what we talk to them about is saying, no, let's actually get into the numbers. And so I had to almost go from being an actor to going into the business and understanding that. So when I came back to Africa, I was like, well, Africa doesn't need any more actors. So what we do need is we need more people that can actually talk to corporates about how this thing makes sense. So one of the major things, so what we're going to be talking about today is, just in a couple of slides, the great opportunity that Africa has. So right now, the global market industry is a $3 trillion industry globally. That is a massive amount of money, $3 trillion. And as I say, all over the world, imagine if Africa just got 5% of 3 trillion. If you're running a business, you just want 5% of anything. Imagine what you could get if you were getting 3 trillion. In about 5 years, this will be about 4.6 trillion, which is massive. The average consumer all over the world consumes 13 hours of content every single day. That is an insane amount. That's content, not writing emails. That's the doom scrolling. That's all of the things. That's Denim in 2017 doing duck lips for Instagram, right? So what we know is that the user base is there, that there's eyeballs that are available. Now, this 20 billion that you see with the dollar sign actually is supposed to be an R for rands, but I was very excited when I was putting this together. But South Africa had just said that they wanted to invest 20 billion rands into the creative economy just this last year. Now, when we look at this, we go, okay, it's one thing to say that you're going to invest in something. It's another thing to understand what it is that you're investing in and how the thing that you're investing in actually brings money back. So the cost of exporting intellectual property. As I said, the intellectual property industry is a $3 trillion industry. But one of the biggest issues that we're having on the continent is what we have in a lot of different industries on the continent, is which means that we are actually importing more things than we are exporting. And now we have an opportunity where we should be creating here and exporting to the rest of the world. But because of our lack of infrastructure opportunities and our lack of understanding about how the creative industry works, we end up having to then give away all of our intellectual property. Now, the loss that we are actually now getting because of this is up to $146 billion a year that we are giving away to the rest of the world because of lack of infrastructure. Now, when we're talking about lack of infrastructure, we're not just talking about building infrastructure. We're talking about technology. We're talking about connectivity. We're talking about a lot of these different mechanisms. And this is part of the issue because, again, we're now moving away from, hey, you guys are just actors wearing makeup, running around on stage. Now we're actually saying, hey, there actually can't be any actors to do anything if we actually don't have the proper infrastructure to do so. So one of the things that we're also trying to move away from is to sell the business, we're more than just geography. In the United States and even in Europe, we look at things like, you see Africa, you see the bloated kid with, malaria and flies flying around its head. And that's the story of Africa. And then a lot of our presidents and politicians go to the United Nations every year and say, Africa needs aid and we need this. And it's all about the things that we need. We're never talking about the things that we're supposed to be creating. Right. And so this is where we kind of come up with this idea about like Africa doesn't need any more aid. It needs trade. And so, but we can't have trade unless we've created infrastructure. Right. And so this becomes part of this thing where originally we're always pitching landscape, cheap labor, and locations to shoot. Now we're talking about what we're now saying is our new value proposition, which would now be incubation hubs, production infrastructure, and intellectual property retention. But how does one do this if we do not have people that are focused on this aspect? And this is the thing that for me, I feel like is the most important. Because as you get older in the United States, the entertainment industry employs about 2.6 million people every single year and pays out about $160 billion in salaries. Now, when you're looking at it from that perspective, that is a massive amount for employment. The show Yellowstone, we did 7 years on that show. In season 4, Darby, Montana, where we were filming, there's about maybe less than 10,000 people in the town. And so the state of Montana wanted to do a KPI report to see what was the actual impact of a television series being in this small little area. And what they actually came, and I didn't put this slide on here, but what they actually came is that it actually did $730 million in tourism, brought 2.2 million visitors to the state of Montana, and created 10,200 new jobs and $1.1 billion in outputs. That's one show. So when you're looking at it from that perspective, one show actually employs, for every one person that's employed in entertainment, 5 other industries are actually being capacitated. So when you're now looking at an actor, you're not just looking at an actor, you're looking at catering, right? If you either look at this, right? There's somebody here there was somebody that came together to put the stage. There's somebody here that's putting lights. There's somebody that's running the air conditioning. There's someone that's putting the chairs. There's someone that has to clean. It goes on and on and on. And this is just for one event for a couple of hours, right? This is the power. Now, when you look at it from the African perspective, when you have about 420 million youth in the continent, 1/3 of the youth on the continent are unemployed. So when we're looking at the entertainment industry, one of the things that we're the most excited about is saying that the entertainment industry is the only industry in the world that can actually employ all industries of the world. because you do not have to have a degree in order to be successful in the entertainment space. No, kids, I'm not saying don't go to school and get a degree and get your education. All that's important. However, we also know we have to be realistic about the issues that we're actually facing here on the continent. And not everybody will be fortunate enough to be able to have access to that. However, everybody at some point or another has driven down a highway and seen somebody building something on the side of a road. That's a carpenter. There's painters. We need people that can build sets. We need people that can do lighting. We need people that can clean and do catering. We need security. This is the only industry that you have that can actually employ every single industry. And this is why its unique value proposition for Africa is so large. So what is the actual flywheel? What is the way that this thing actually happens? Usually when you talk, they say, okay, you're throwing a lot of numbers around. This is really exciting, but where do we start? So what I always say is policy must align with profitability. It's one thing I always say, the problem with actors is we're very, very passionate individuals. But I have this thing where I say your passion is going to make you poor, because we get so passionate that we don't actually understand about the business that we're in, because we're like, hey, invest in me. Why? Because I'm passionate. And it's like, if only we could all make money like that, right? So instead, we have to actually create an economic flywheel so that it becomes easily digestible. So one is the incentive. If you're looking at here in Africa, one of the incentives that we talk about all over the world is your film tax incentives. In Africa, there's actually only three, there are technically two now, but there's actually only three countries all over Africa that actually have a film tax incentive. What is a film tax incentive? Essentially, it's an incentive for you to come and you'll get some type of rebate. Might be 30%, 35%, or 40%. South Africa has had one. It hasn't been strongly operational for the last couple of years because of a lot of things, things happen. Okay. New cards have to be bought. But for, we have it, Mauritius goes anywhere between 35% to 40%. Morocco, same thing, about 40% as well. And this is very, very important because without having a proper tax incentive, there's no real reason for people to leave the nation that they're in to come to where you are, right? So you want to create a strong incentive. Then this is where investment will come. And so this is important because when you have investment, now you obviously have the opportunity where you can actually create some leverage. But you cannot get people investing in something, again, as I said, who actually don't know how this thing works. And part of the entertainment industry that we struggle with is that you have a lot of people at the political level making decisions about the creative economy who they themselves have never been a part of, right? And even if you look at basic businesses, one of the hard parts that a lot of businesses have is that when the CEO steps down or retires, usually the CFO becomes the CEO, and then the business doesn't usually go very well because the CEO is thinking about things that a CFO is not thinking of, and vice versa. And this is what we're having with the creative economy, where you have a lot of people in politics that are saying, hey, we'll just give you guys a little bit of money. You guys go play over there, and then we're going to talk about trade and do like the growing up things at this table. When in retrospect, it's a thing that you could actually create massive growth opportunities right now. If you put $500 million into the economy just to the creative industry, you're creating tens of millions of jobs immediately based upon that impact. So then we're talking about streamlining. Streamlining, again, this is going back to the infrastructural aspect, getting more people less interested in being artists on stage and more people that are interested in building the structure. Our major goal is to invest, train, and capacitate. We want to invest not only monetarily, but through education. Right. And I think that oftentimes because of the technology that we have now have access to around the world with AI and the connectivity, what we have this propensity to do on the continent is we want to keep up with what's happening in other places around the world. But through the creative industry, Africa is still very, very young. In the United States, Hollywood started a little bit over 120 years ago. We technically, by this time, if you're looking at it through like real metrics, we're like in the 1960s. If you were to actually look at it from where we are, we're very much in the infancy stage. So there's a tremendous amount of understanding and education that we have to get to. But if we can educate first, investment will come. And then from investment, that's come lifelong infrastructure. So what our goal is at Opulent Entertainment Group is building a Hollywood in our backyard, is building a situation of life where you don't have to leave the continent in order to get opportunities. The thing that I think that we're having in Africa is we're having massive brain drain, where our best and our brightest are going to other nations, building them up, and then occasionally send remittance back. Right now, remittance around the world comes back to Africa in $8 billion a year. Imagine if that was actually being invested here on the continent. If we unlock the Midlands, the world comes to us.